Hey folks, and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be painting this beautiful sculpt from CA 3D Studios. This is Magik from XMen. I'm going to show you guys how we turn this beautiful thing into a painted and lit up base. Take a look at that. Let's see how I do it. So first off, I did print this base and the flames in a clear resin, and that's so we can do these cool lit up effects with these flickering LEDs that I found on Amazon for pretty cheap. First we're going to start by primering everything. So what I did was I masked off all the areas I wanted to keep clear and primer with just a black Vallejo primer. Run-of-the-mill black primer works just fine. Same thing on this base. Now I want to do the outside in a metallic look, and the top's still going to be clear, so we're going to mask that off, primer it with black. Then we're going to bring in one of my favorite things here in just a moment after we're done primering all of these parts. Since we have the black primer out, we might also primer everything. Just look at the details of these sculpt. I mean, this is a pretty simple one, but gosh, I love the details. I love her armored arm. The soul sword arm looks so good. And again, the details of a pretty simple sculpt. So if you're looking to get into printing resin prints and you want something a little bit simpler, these guys have some really good options for you. So next up, we're going to use this lacquer steel that I have. I really like this color. I used something from this range in my last build, my Millennia from Elden Ring figure that I did. Go ahead and check the links in the description for that video if you'd like to check it out. But I used the steel color this time to give it a nice metallic look. Just look at those details and those little symbols there. So then we're going to paint the black X-Men logo with just some Vallejo black. Nothing special there. One thing to note is that I did put some masking fluid inside of those little symbols. I didn't record it, but inside those little symbols around the base there is masking fluid, and I'm going to show you later on why that's so important, because there's a little effect I really wanted to bring out with this base, just because I thought it was such a great opportunity. So we can see we still have that top is clear. Now here, I'm going to try something. So I took some transparent blue and white because I didn't have anything really light blue that was transparent. And I'm painting the inside that light blue color. Remember I said I had masked off those little symbols around the base. So put a little bit of blue on the inside. We'll let any light that comes through those symbols later on stay blue. So I also lightly went over the top of the base and then these flames with that same light blue color. And although it's not a transparent paint, it came across a little opaque. I probably could have done something different, but the results are still pretty good. So I came back with some of these other blue colors from Citadel, and what I'm trying to do is add a blue gradient here. So take notice, look, I painted it from the top down with darker colors. Did the same thing with this Tehran blue, just trying to add some kind of gradient in there. Let's call them shadows within the flames, because if you look at fire, it's always brightest at the bottom and darkest on top. So after I got that done, I wanted to solder these lights together, and I think there's like 13 lights in all. I don't know. You can pause the video and count them if you really want to, but I promise there's a bunch there. And look how that looks. We get this nice flickering flame look. It's not as great as I was hoping, but I'm still happy with the results. So one thing to keep in mind, folks, is that I've never lit up a base before. So this is new for me to paint something that's clear and light it up. This is totally new. So I was trying to see if I get the sword to light up as well, and I had some success. So what I did was I painted this sword with Imperial Fist from Citadel, which is a nice yellowish color. So just a side note, the folks at CA 3D Studios did a really nice render for us to reference as we paint this. But one of the things I went back and did, just as I do with my historical figures, is I always look up a picture or reference photo of something elsewhere, and what I found was that this sword was one of her later swords in the comic book series, and it was yellow, and her portals are always shown in like a blue color. So that's where I chose my colors from, just as an FYI, in case you're maybe unfamiliar with the character or whatnot. I actually first found her playing Marvel's Midnight Sun, so I thought her character was really cool. But anyway, I'm missing the point of the video, right? So we're dry brushing the edges of this sword with some dry brush paint from Ammo, which I really love. If you've ever been to my channel before, you know I use this a lot on my tanks and on any kind of armor on a model. So it just looks so good with the black base and then with the silver dry brush over the edges. Just gives it a nice worn weathered look. Now we're going to do a zenithal highlight, but I'm going to use gray blue over top of this black rather than the typical white. And the reason for this is, if we just did white, we would get some really harsh grays in my opinion. And we wouldn't use gray blue because we want to kind of make the black look a little faded, or else we're just going to have a black boring model. What we want to do is add some type of gradient, but we don't want it to be too harsh with white on black. So the reason I chose gray blue instead of just gray is because typically your blacks, when you have like a shine to them or whatnot, they usually are like a bluish color, because if we know our colors in our clothing, black always fades to blue. So that's kind of why, because of the blue inks that are in there. So anyway, that's why I chose gray blue as the zenithal highlight. Not such a harsh contrast, but it gives us a nice subtle contrast on those blacks. And again, zenithal, we're doing a highlight from above with that gray blue. So all of our parts, we're looking at our reference photo, seeing where the light's hitting our character, and we're using that as the basis for our zenithal. Just like any other modeling, make sure you have a reference photo available so you know which way your light's hitting it or where the shadows would hit it. Reference photos are key in any type of modeling or figure painting. So you can see I did the same thing with her face, but one thing to note is I did use an off-white zenithal for the skin colors. So then I took this black Templar from Citadel and I used this to paint over the zenithal highlight. So these Citadel paints are really nice out of an airbrush. You don't need to thin them down. They spray right out the bottle, and they're kind of translucent, so you naturally get these really thin layers, and you can see how it covers up the zenithal, but there's still that highlight. The next thing here is to use this ink. So I use this ink to try to add some contrast in. Now I will say I've never done a black figure before, an all black suited figure, if you will, like a Batman or something. I have never done that. So this is the first time I had some experience trying to do contrast on an all black dressed character. So this ink I used to kind of, let's say, highlight the shadowed areas, similar to what I would do on my tanks, highlight the shadows, and it came out okay, but there's still just not enough contrast. This just looks boring for right now. So before I move forward, I put a satin coat on because I'm thinking, okay, these are leather parts. They would kind of have a satin sheen to them. They wouldn't be matte. So it does twofold. It gives me the look I want, and it protects it from these next steps in case I screw up or something. So I'm using polished metal over these buckles on her boots. It's just any kind of metal color would work. I like polished metal. I just think it looks really sharp and it really stands out. Something like gunmetal might be too dark. I even did a little zipper on the back, and I thought it looked cool. But again, we still need more details. I need more contrast. So I took that ink and I put it down the zipper lining here to kind of add that seam. So I'm trying to, like, how do you make black on black stand out? Again, this is the challenge of a black suited or black dressed character. So again, I'm using this ink because it's the blackest of blacks that I have. I'm using this black ink on all these seams, and I'm starting to see some contrast. You're starting to see a little bit. Now, I thought, okay, these straps need to stand out more, and they're made of a slightly different texture. At least they look that way, so I tried it, and you can tell the difference right there. It really makes those straps stand out, so I did it to the whole boot. I thought, now this is what I'm looking for. This is the contrast. You guys can see the shadows. You can see the different details that are on there. It worked. It just worked, and I'm so glad it did. So now I'm going to take that same technique, and I'm going to apply it everywhere else. So again, with the polished metal, I used the black ink to highlight all the seams on her pants, her shirt. I also wanted to do it on this metal arm that she has, the soul sword armor. So I did highlight some of the edges, and then I went over all the cloth parts. So there's not just metal, on this armored arm, there's not just metal, there's also cloth in there, so I used that to kind of give it some shadows, highlight, and then went over with a dry brush of the same polished metal, that light metal from ammo that you saw me do on the sword. Look how it brings out the details of her hands. I just thought that turned out so beautifully using the inks underneath on the cloth and then the light metal dry brush over the edges. This arm, really, this was the reason I wanted to do this model. I love armor. I make tanks. This reminds me of the inside of a tank, and it just looks so cool. Specifically, some of the German components of their interiors. So now moving on to the skin tone. So I grabbed this magenta from ammo, and after I applied a highlight earlier, which I didn't record, of an off-white on the skin portions, I'm now highlighting the skin in this magenta color. So any pink color, purple color, you're just trying to add in some undertones, let's call it, with this pink. And you can see it's just holding it at an angle, creating a second zenithal, basically the pink over top of the white. And the reason you want to still do white first is so it actually shows up pink, because if you just paint pink over the black, you're just going to get a dark pink. It's not going to look right. You got to paint it white first. So you have to do the white zenithal, then do the pink zenithal, purple, whatever color you got that's close. And you can see here I did the same thing on the face. Then I used this transparent red from Vallejo on the bottom part. So this is to cover up any of the parts that are black, basically blend anything that's not painted into the pink part that we did on the first step. So you get this nice shadowy hue. I mean, it looks really cool at that point. Same thing on the face. And what this does is it essentially creates the reddish shadow that you get just on anyone's skin, on a person's skin. It's a really natural look. So the next thing here, I use this bronze flesh from Reaper paint. So this is a recommendation from a friend over at Hobby Time Modelers. Recommended this Reaper paint for figures, but now he recommended it for brush painting, but I figured what the heck, I have a use for it. I'll try these tones in airbrush painting, and I will say it has some thinner in it already, so it's a little bit thinner than Vallejo's paints to start with, but not like watery thin. It almost has like a flow improver in it, and I only had to thin them down very little to get them to spray out of the brush, and I was actually impressed. They sprayed really nice, so definitely a good recommendation. Thanks, Donnie. Now moving on to the face, same thing. We're using this same flesh tone, but notice I'm only coming in from above, so it's kind of like a zenithal again in the way I'm highlighting this skin, and it's very thin layers, just trying to add in those skin tones over top of our pink and red tone that we started with. So the next step is I'm bringing in pale flesh. Again, this is from Reaper, and I'm using it as a highlight. So I'm just lightly touching some areas that would be more exposed to the light that's coming in our scene here to highlight some areas. Same thing over her face. So the areas of her face are going to be like her cheekbones and her nose, you know. And again, if you keep your airbrush spraying down from the top like a zenithal, it'll work really well. Then the last step is to take this medium flesh, and I didn't find something comparable in the Reaper set, at least not yet. So I stuck with the Vallejo that I've used in the past, and this is basically a blending color that you're going to use to blend that bottom part that's still that reddish purple black color, the shadow coat that we did, and you're going to blend it in with the other skin tones. And you see, you just lightly keep layering it up, and you'll get this nice transition between those reddish purple to the flesh tones on top. It's just a really nice gradient. So now that we have the skin tones done and her all black armor, we can put it together. And if you notice, I did do the ink on the tops of her leggings there as well. So really nice touch it adds, I think. And there we can see the results of the upper torso done as well with the black inks. We can add on that awesome set of armored arm that we did earlier. Now we do have one more arm we need to do, And I used the same techniques I showed you guys, so there's nothing really new to see. You can see her skin's already done. Everything's highlighted with the inks. So we need to add her little X-Men logo here. So you gotta paint over the black with white first, and then you're gonna paint the red, because if you just paint red on it, again, it won't show up very well over top of the black. So just paint it white, then paint it red, and you'll get a really nice look. And at this point, we have her put together. Except for her head. We need to finish off her face. Now, this is the part that a lot of people dread, and I actually, I don't dread this part, but it can be a little nerve-wracking. So you can see I used orange for the eyebrows, and I like using reddish flesh for her lips, just because it's a natural lip color. I don't need to put any fancy you know, lip color on like red. It doesn't need lipstick or anything. I'm just trying to go for a nice natural look, because I like natural beauty. So, and I'm an artist now, so I can say I'm gonna paint this the way I want her to look. So I will say I need to come back and fix her lips. I'll do that in a moment. But while I'm doing that, I did come in with black, just Vallejo black, and filled in her eyes and kind of gave her like an eyeshadow, did her eyelashes as well. I just think this is an easy way to do it, is to start with black as the base. You see I touched up the lips there because it was bothering me. Then I went back with an off-white. I think specifically I used Cream of Ice, which is an interior color for German tanks. It works perfectly for the eyes because it's a nice off-white, subtly off-white color, and I just filled in the area of the white part of the eye, and you can see how you naturally have that eyeshadowy look without having to worry about painting the black over the white. Just paint the white over the black, and I think it looks really good. Now we need to do her eyes, and interestingly enough, she's a green-eyed, blonde-haired woman, so it must have been something to do with all the crazy things they did to her in the stories. But either way, it's definitely unique. I would expect her to have red hair, but nope, she's blonde. Now, with the green eyes, I just used pure green from Ammo and a lot of patience and just dabbed at it. You can do this many different ways. There's other options with decals and stuff, but really if you have a fine enough paintbrush and your paint flows okay enough, you can get pretty close to perfectly round. When you zoom out, it looks round, and that's all we need to do. Now, this next trick is another trick from a figure painter in Hobby Time Modelers group that helped me out with this, is to use a toothpick to do the pupils, because it's going to give you a nice round dot, and it's so much easier than trying to do it with a paintbrush. So let's get that eye just right. There we go. Now, nice and round. Now, if only you had a bigger toothbrush. I always say toothbrush when I mean toothpick. If you had a bigger toothpick, then you could make the irises round too. So, food for thought. And then I added some little highlights in there with some white paint. Now the last step is to put some gloss over those eyes and over the lips. And that's going to give it a natural shine no matter what angle the light hits it at, which I just think looks really, really good. Now, we have one more thing we need to do, which is her hair. So, looking at the reference photos, they gave her like this bright yellow hair that's just completely unnatural. And again, I like them to look natural. So, I'm using Dunkelgelb colors. It's interesting that the German tank colors match perfectly to blonde hair. So, I'll let you inference what you will. But, we're going to use the Dunkelgelb light base and then highlights to give her a nice blonde, natural looking hair color. Now, if you're thinking it's a little light, it's because I'm going to add this brown wash for German dark yellow. It's like I'm painting a tank, except it's hair. It's comical for me and for anyone who's ever watched any of my other videos, because this is literally the same colors I use on German armor. But it looks so good, because that brown is what, if you look at anybody with blonde hair, the shadows in their hair is always a brown color. It's never yellow. If you see somebody with yellow hair, they dyed it or something crazy. I mean, women do that, but it doesn't look like that in real life. So I like to make my magical characters look real. Darn it, it's my choice. But after we got her blonde hair done, we're going to paint her little things here in her hair, which is kind of part of her armor. I don't know if it's a headband. It's not. Doesn't look like a headband. Whatever it is, these little black things that stick out, they look really cool. Give her a very unique look. Once that's done, we can put her head on, and then this model is ready to rock. Alright folks, that's going to do it for me today. I appreciate you guys hanging in there and checking out this video. I hope you liked this build. If you did, please leave a like, leave a comment, ask me any questions you like, tell me what you think about this model. And hey, I hope you guys join me here as I finish up this tiger here in the coming days and get some mud on this tiger. We'll talk to you guys soon.